It's been called an axe, a voice, and a warning. The mysterious stone monolith, known as the Stone Axe of Coco, is one of the most enigmatic relics from ancient Peru, and it may have had a significant impact on the local Inca culture. But how exactly did this strange artifact come to be, and what was its purpose? Join us as we explore the origins, meaning and significance of the Stone Axe of Coco. As with many archaeological finds, the first thing that people wondered when they came across the Stone Axe of Coco was how old it was. The artifact was discovered in 1927 by the Peruvian archaeologist Julia Tello, and it was found at the site of a large ceremonial center named after the nearby Cocototo River, where the Great Inca Wall also begins. Despite being broken into 3 pieces, the fragments were still imposing. The largest weighed over 660 pounds, while the 2 smaller pieces weighed about 220 pounds each. But dating the artifact proved to be quite tricky. When they first analyzed the site, they estimated that the stone axe was about 300 years old, which meant that it would have been created during the Inca Empire's heyday. However, further research showed that the site itself was actually much older, going back thousands of years before the Inca even arrived in the region, and the true age of the stone axe was much older than anyone expected. By studying the pottery found nearby, researchers determined that the ceremonial center was likely used for about 1,000 years before the Inca took over the area. This means that the monolithic axe could have been crafted any time within that first millennium. Researchers now believe that the stone monolith was actually made around the year 800 AD and may have belonged to a pre-Inca civilization instead. Unfortunately, there isn't much archaeological evidence left behind from this early civilization, so the true identity of the stone axe's creators remains unknown. But if it wasn't created by the Inca, then why do so many people refer to it as the Inca stone axe? Well, it is because the Inca were the last people to use the ceremonial center at Cocuyo before the Spanish arrived and destroyed everything. But these indigenous people weren't the first ones to make use of the site either. Researchers believe that the original builders of the site were the Yark, who inhabited the central Andes from roughly 1800 BC until about 200 BC. Molderas are considered to be the first Andean civilization, but they didn't leave behind any written records, so everything that archaeologists have learned about them has come from their material culture. We know that they constructed large settlements with impressive buildings and monumental architecture, but we don't know anything about their religious beliefs or daily life. Unfortunately, almost nothing remains of their culture today, except for some ceramics, stonework, and metal. A few hundred years later, another civilization arose in the central Andes called the Rec. They lived from roughly 200 BC until 600 AD, and they followed a completely different religion from the Yar cultures, one that was centered around animal sacrifice. Archaeologists believe that the Rakuya were more warlike than their predecessors, and they may have been the ones responsible for building the earliest stone fortresses in the Andes. Then between 600 and 1400 AD, several small chiefdoms rose to prominence in the central Andes. These cultures eventually coalesced into one empire, the Inca, who ruled over a vast domain that stretched from Ecuador to Chile. The Inca Empire reached its peak at the end of the 1400s, but it was utterly destroyed just a century later thanks to the Spanish conquistadors. Despite knowing very little about the AR cultures and Rikuyas, scientists have a pretty good idea of who the Inca were and how they functioned. Unlike their predecessors, the Inca kept detailed records of everything that happened throughout their empire. They recorded important dates and events by tying colored strings together in a specific pattern, kind of like a knotted bracelet. And their record-keeping system is how we know so much about their history. We know that the Inca worshipped a sky god named Inti, who was assisted by the earth goddess Pachamama. The Inca worshipped both of these deities as supreme overlords, and they believed that Inti and Pachamama blessed the land with fertility and success. In fact, Inca society was deeply entwined with the natural world, and many of their rituals celebrated the sun, the moon, stars, and planets. The Inca also built a lot of temples dedicated to the gods, but these shrines were usually made of wood and mud brick, not stone. So far, only a few stone temples have been found throughout their former domain, and all of them were built at high altitudes away from human settlements. This makes the temple at Cocorico especially unique, since it was made entirely out of stone and it was built right in the middle of a bustling city. It was clearly an important structure, but we don't know exactly what role it played in Inca society. What we do know comes from the artifacts that were found buried underneath the temple and throughout the settlement. Archaeologists uncovered many ceremonial items, including plenty of ceramics and jewelry, as well as a number of stone statues. Some of these statues appear to depict feline deities, while others look like stylized human faces. These figures were likely placed throughout the town to watch over the citizens and ensure that they behaved properly. But the most intriguing find was the monolithic stone axe, which is now known as the Stone Axe of Coco. Today, the axe is divided into 3 parts. The handle is about 6 feet long and it looks like the head of a puma. Both the handle and blade are meticulously carved and polished, but it doesn't appear to be a tool that was used for chopping wood or farming. In fact, the entire thing is too small to be functional. Instead, the axe seems to have been used for ceremonial purposes, but nobody knows for sure. Some archaeologists believe that the stone axe represents the Sky Father Inti, while others think that it symbolizes the Earth Mother. The puma head could represent the celestial realm, since pumas were often seen as spiritual creatures in Inca mythology. The feline deity that the axe resembles may have been one of the most important gods in the Inca pantheon. Their main characteristics were strength, courage, skill, and speed, and they may have been associated with lightning, thunder, rain, and the stars. The puma's connection to lightning could explain why the axe was eventually buried under a temple. After all, tall, pointed objects like axes and spears were believed to attract lightning strikes, so burying such an object would appease the feline deity and prevent it from unleashing its fury upon the town. However, the puma god theory doesn't explain why the artifact was shattered. In fact, nobody knows why the axe was broken, but one researcher came up with an interesting guess. Alan Garnica, a Peruvian anthropologist, believes that the Inca people revered the stone axe of Coco as the voice of the earth. He believes that the axe was originally one giant monolith, but it was split into 3 pieces during an earthquake. According to legend, earthquakes were caused by the wrath of the earth goddess Pachamama, so destroying the voice of the earth would pacify her and bring an end to the disaster. This may explain why the axe was buried beneath the temple. After all, the stone structures that the Inca built were meant to hold back the forces of nature, whether that be earthquakes, floods, or landslides. Garnica also noted that the puma god was often depicted with 3 heads, and the resulting pieces of the stone axe mimic this description. If this theory is correct, then the axe would have been too sacred to ever be used as a mere tool. Instead, it would have been treated as a powerful relic that could speak to the Inca and tell them what the gods wanted. But even if the axe wasn't a literal voice, it could have still served as a symbol of the earth and its power. After all, the monolith was made out of granite, which is one of the hardest rocks in existence. Making an axe out of granite would have required advanced tools and techniques, and it would have been incredibly time-consuming. This means that the axe probably represented the earth's strength and durability. Whatever the case may be, the true purpose of the stone axe will never be known. The Inca Empire was destroyed over 500 years ago, and there's no way of knowing what secrets they lost to time. But one thing is for sure. The stone axe of Coco is one of the most remarkable artifacts to ever be found in the Andes, and it will continue to fascinate scientists and the public for decades to come. Now, check out other videos about ancient artifacts, or watch What's Real and What's Fake at